Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Janae Tibshirani and today I'm joined by Siah Hwee Ang, the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University. Welcome, Siah.
Thanks for having me here again, Jenny.
Thank you. Look, there are two things I'd like to speak to you about today. Firstly is this the government's invitation for more foreign investors to help build hotels in New Zealand. And secondly is cybersecurity and I guess the way, I guess the importance of cybersecurity as we do business with Asia. So to talk about the hotels first, earlier this week, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise released a report that it's done, which found that we need to build another 26 hotels above what is planned over the next 10 years to meet the demand. And in doing this research, it said that it's going to fast track or accelerate private sector investment in New Zealand, to get this investment going. What is the level of investment from Asian investors in the New Zealand hotel sector already?
Right, I'm not too sure whether I've actually ready-made answers for that question, in particular at the investment level, but if you actually look at the background towards this kind of call for actually more investments, you can ask the first question, right, around the fact that, there's always question around the fact that we are actually over-reliant on agriculture, but no doubt as a nation, agriculture is always going to be our number one, in our trading portfolio, right? So, and then we also know that down the road is actually tourism, which is actually our number two, which is important, of course, education aside, but let's talk about tourism here. So tourism is always going to be number two, and it's no surprise that, within the country that we actually sometimes when we walk around the streets in some of our cities, we actually struggle in terms of trying to find certain kind of locations, sort of the places of interest, right? So you ask the question, okay, if we keep having more and more tourists here, why are we still asking the question, how come we have a shortage of hotels, right? Okay, because we all know that around the world, every other big cities nowadays, even those in Asia, are actually not just building, but already have built a lot of hotels because everyone is anticipating tourists to increase. And in fact, we have so much increase in tourist numbers in the last few years, as far as I know, to the extent that you ask the question, why are we asking this same question again, like, you just build something, right? And if you actually look at the streets in places where tourists goes, you also see that there is significant amount of stores, such as those that are selling souvenirs. And in fact, if you walk in, they are actually owned by Asians. And actually, this gives you a kind of indication of what is actually coming up, because you can imagine that when, the floodgate is open, when you say, hey guys, we actually need more hotels, there will be a lot of Asian investors trying to actually build right in the country and say, and sometimes I always say that it's very interesting if the Kiwi companies are not getting involved or Kiwi investors are not getting involved. It's very hard to say, look, why is the money not being kept in the country? And that's because the investors tends to be coming from Asia, and then sometimes the money just go back to Asia.
Sure, so they're investing in here and they're taking it back, but we don't realistically have the capital, the resources ourselves to make these sorts of big investments in the hotels, do we? Yeah. Some
parts of me tells me that it's tough, but some parts of me tells me that it's possible. It's not.
Okay.
I don't think we should observe a lopsided kind of things, because in major hotels like museum hotels and other hotels that we used to have is actually normally owned by Kiwis to start with, right? Eventually the ownership change as a result of that, but that just doesn't stop some of our own Kiwi investors to actually invest in hotels.
I mean, you have to wonder how the government can come out with this report, which makes it sound pretty bad, like we are quite behind the ball in terms of, having supply that's going to meet demand. You would have thought that this would have been foreseen. It hasn't surely just sprung up on us like this and we suddenly have this big shortage and we suddenly need all this investment. I don't know if you think it was a bit behind the ball in this.
I would imagine that, it's not a criticism, but basically it doesn't behave like a very business savvy approach to it, because in the real world, when we talk about business savvy, then we think about forecasting numbers, right? So we forecast that the kind of demand is going to increase, then you start increasing supply rather than the demand comes and then you scramble, right, to find ways to actually cope with the demand, which is what is happening now. So what it means is that, we'll continue to face the kind of challenges around the fact that you have tourists that comes here that they want to live in a decent hotel, they can't find many, right? They end up living in a, like a equivalent of a 3-star or 2-star in Asia, and I have to be a bit more, explain this part here, right? Because if you go around in New Zealand hotels, a lot of our 4 stars is actually not 4 stars in Asia, equivalent, and our 5 stars is not really 5-star. If you have lived in Asian hotels, right? Whereby you have, a lot of different, not just in terms of the size of the hotels, but the kind of luxurious look, right? That actually looks very different. Okay, and
I mean, you look at the Langham from the outside, and it doesn't really look like anything too spectacular, does it?
Yep, but it's a 5-star.
Yeah, exactly.
From this country's perspective, right? But again, we have to be customer oriented. So the customer's 5-star is actually not the 5-star that we have here, right? And so when they come here, then of course, because I know quite a lot of people from China, and because they come and tell me, look, your hotels are not that great. So I think, one wonders whether maybe when the Asian investors comes, they will actually be able to invest in real 5 stars that actually caters to Asian. Maybe the Asians understand Asia well.
Yeah,
right?
sure, so, they understand that market.
Precisely.
Okay, and the government says in its release, and it is a bit vague, it says that it wants to match-make investors with opportunities and reduce the time taken to fill information gaps that can slow down investment. So it wants to fast-track this process of foreign investors building hotels. It's quite vague, though. I mean, do you think the government will really fast-track this, or will investors still have to go through the really long and administrative heavy process that they currently do if they want to invest elsewhere, like through the Overseas Investment Office? And we've talked about this quite a bit, about how that process is quite slow. Do you think this will be different?
Yeah, I think, again, we all don't know what is the definition of fast track, right? And the worry is that when you use words like fast track, it could also mean that, let's have one less procedures. No, one less procedures doesn't really mean much, because it actually saves you maybe another 1-2 weeks, right? But we are talking about a process of building hotels. It's not some e-commerce trade or whatever that you can click a button and maybe, one less procedure means about 15 minutes faster. This won't go any faster. The building process takes a long time, right? So if you're talking about a procedure, fast track procedure of saving up 1-2 weeks, actually, on in the grand scheme of things, is actually meaningless, right?
It will still be slow.
It will still be very slow.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to understand exactly what fast track means, right? Does it mean that we are actually going to accelerate the process of building those, right? Not just in terms of approving them. And of course, if we talk about fast track of approving them, let's be realistic about it. Let's have some rules, right, and guidelines about it, because if we are talking about so many hotels, the more then you need certain criteria. Otherwise, everyone is going to come and have different criteria about how much stays, how many employees are supposed to be from New Zealand, as opposed to bringing in a lot of other migrants to do similar jobs as well. Presumably, we have to. We may not have enough people, so might be bringing in migrants. So there are a lot of other implications that comes out of this kind of serious investment coming out from Asia, right?
Sure, you're right. There's more than just building the physical building.
Because you do have to create the infrastructure, which includes, trying to manage those hotels and servicing those hotels with people in the buildings, right? And in whatever we have, do we have enough people in the hospitality industries that allows us to do that? Maybe the answer is no, right? Then we have to bring in people from outside. Then there's certain criteria that needs to be in place.
Well, yeah, I look forward to watching the space in this, and perhaps putting a few of these questions to the Minister and to NZTE as well.
Yes.
Secondly, Siah, I just wanted to jump to a slightly different topic, cybersecurity. I was at a cybersecurity summit that was organised by the government earlier this month. One of the keynote speakers there, Jim Lewis, he's US-based and he's from the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. he made a really interesting remark and he said basically cyber espionage was a common practice for Chinese business people. So if they're doing their due diligence, then spying on potential business partners was just common practice. And this was backed up by another speaker from Siah, who referred to an Australian company which their IT security people apparently blocked 200 efforts to break into the IT system just as they were doing some negotiations with the Chinese firm. If this is happening in Australia and America, is it happening here?
It depends on whether our companies are doing things that I think are sensitive, right? So if you are trying to work with a Chinese company and it so happens that the Chinese company is dealing with you in sensitive materials, they will want to check on you, right, a lot more than just to say, look, we are safe, there's no conflict of interest, don't worry, right? It's so much so that it's easy for us from the perspective of New Zealand that we actually tends to be more trusting, and to be honest, we have less to lose in general, so we might not be checked as much as the rest of the world. And when I say the rest of the world, then there are a lot of all these, I wouldn't use, the extreme word is called animosity, but I don't think it's animosity, but between, say China and Australia and US, there's always this kind of like, you watch me, I watch you, you spy me, I spy you, right? So everyone is literally spying each other because there's a lot more to lose, based on both the sort of the intersection between economics and security, right? And if you are dealing with, say, IT services or IT industries and where materials or whatever services that we are talking about, negotiation and other things, becomes critical, there will be a lot more of this kind of things happening. Right? I don't see us getting ourselves into that kind of territory whereby our US and Australian counterparts are complaining about, not to that extent.
But maybe still happening? Could
be, especially with, like I say, sensitive kind of industry like government procurement or other things, right? You might be checked, and then that would be quite normal. I wouldn't suspect that other countries won't be doing similar spying around, to be honest.
Sure, exactly. Well, I mean, the Jim Lewis, he's American, and no doubt the Americans would do the same, I'd imagine. Yeah,
they all spy at each other, and just to let you know is that the latest thing that I've actually observed is that Indonesia is now thinking about their own internet. We know that China says that they need their own internet. We know that Facebook doesn't work, Twitter doesn't work. So when I go to China, I struggle to tweet some of the things that I often tweet, and so I have to long myself to come back to New Zealand to actually tweet for the things that I'm already behind. But so they have their own internet, and now the other countries, the big countries that are in the South China Sea or whatever you call it, very sensitive towards issues around cybersecurity. So they are thinking about their own internet as well.
Interesting.
And if that happens, right, soon the floodgate will be open. Every country will have their own internet. The big ones at least, right, will be arguing for their own internet, and that's where that the spying exercise might be a bit less, because right now we are talking about an internet world whereby spying is highly possible. You can just literally go in, and companies has to actually block it rather than the internet block it.
Okay.
Right? In China, they don't allow those Twitter and everything, is because they just want to totally block it without doing that ad hocly. They just want to do it systematically.
And Indonesia's going down that same path.
Yeah, it's looking into it already, because as you look around, if China can do it, why not?
Yeah, interesting. Well, I mean, Indonesia's massive, and it's such a diverse country, so that is quite fascinating.
Yeah, I won't be surprised India might be asking for it too, right? At some point, we know how India works, in terms of world trade, negotiations and other things. So,
Okay, well, I will be watching that space too. Siah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
really,
Jenny.
really interesting talking to you. And I'm Janae Tibshirani, and have been joined today by Siah Hwee Ang, the BNZ Chair in Business in Asia at Victoria University.